challenge you. 75% of the wonderful Quran in my wonderful language of Arabic is from the Bible.
He says, let me challenge you, me or the audience, or all. Let me challenge you. 75% of the wonderful Quran in my wonderful Arabic is from the Bible. Do you remember that? And he said he can show it to you now. I said, no, have your patience. He had 75 minutes. He didn't show one example. 75% of this book is copied in that, and he could not show us one example. You see, you know what is to copy, what is to crib, what is to plagiarize, stealing somebody else's literature. Look, the Christians and the Jews have been at it. They have been at it. They have written books. Here, Judaism in the Quran by Abraham Katz, few hundred pages. Then the sources of Islam, the sources of the Quran by Reverend Saint Claire Tinsdale. Books. They have written more than 60,000 books against Islam from 1800 to 1950. More than 60,000 books they have been written so far. See, they behave like innocent little children, little babes, like cherubims, but not cherubims. They have written more than 60,000. Among them, here, Judaism in the Quran. Here, the sources of Islam, sources of the Quran. Reverend Saint Claire Tinsdale. Reverend and Saint, he wrote the book. And he is giving verses. That one they are giving verses. But this was originally written in Farsi, Persian, in the Persian language. So, Reverend Sir William Moyer, he translates this into English. And he writes a preface. He writes a preface to his translation. And he says, it is strange, it's odd, it's unusual, it's extraordinary. He says, it is strange that though the Jewish and Christian scriptures are spoken of throughout the Quran with the utmost devotion. The Quran speaks about the Jewish and Christian scriptures, the Torah, the Zabur, the Injil, with utmost devotion. Only one passage is quoted from them. That's all, only one. Though the Quran is speaking about it, 75% is copied. Says Dr. Sharosh, 3/4 is copied from the Bible. Yet this great man, Sir William Moore, a scholar, he says only one passage is quoted from them. Namely, and he quotes, the meek shall inherit the earth. One quotation. Now, look for it. There isn't such a verse in the Quran. The nearest is وَلَقَدْ صَرَّفْنَا وَلَقَدْ كَتَبْنَا فِي الزَّبُورِ مِنْ بَعْدِ الذِّكْرِ أَنَّ الْأَرْضَ يَرِثُهَا عِبَادِيَ الصَّالِحُونَ. Said that we had given to Dawood in the Zabur this message that to my righteous servants will inherit the earth. That is what the Quran says. But this quotation, the meek shall inherit the earth, you find that in Matthew chapter 5 verse 5, where Jesus says, the meek shall inherit the earth. Now you see that in the Bible that our doctor has given me, there are cross-references, and it tells you that this quotation is from Psalms chapter 37 verse 11. That quotation is from Psalms. Jesus says, blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. But when you look for it, you find it in Psalms chapter 37 verse 11. Word for word. But Jesus didn't give the credit to David. He said, look, I got this from the Psalms. Muhammad is made to say that this is written He's actually quoting, this is written, he's giving due credit in the Zabur, it is there, and you find that this is what...
أقول هذا أيضا غير موجود في القرآن. إذا كان القرآن يقول في مواطن كثيرة بأن الله على كل شيء قدير، فإن التوراة تخبرنا في سفر صموئيل وسفر القضاء بأن الله عز وجل كان مع يهوذا حين قاتلوا أهل الجبل ولم يطرد سكان الوادي. لماذا؟ لأن لهم مركبات من حديد، فالرب عجز عن طرد سكان الوادي. فالنظرية القرآنية عن الله تختلف تماما عن النظرية التوراتية. فكيف يقال بأن القرآن
So it's timeless. It's a timeless miracle. But also we could talk about many other miracles in the Quran as well. For example, let's take history as an example. We know the Quran talks about history in a very profound way. It talks about history in a very deep way. It says, beware of your civilizational arrogance. You think you're a great civilization? Look at the civilizations before you. They became dust. Beware of your arrogance. But also the Quran mentions history in a way that really doesn't affect its message. It's so minute. If you were to take this sentence out of the Quran, it probably wouldn't make a big difference. But why is it there? The Quran mentions 2 different titles for the leader of the Egyptians. At the time of Musa alayhi salam, he's mentioned as Pharaoh. At the time of Yusuf alayhi salam, he's mentioned as Malik, king. Why the 2 different titles? The Bible always mentioned Pharaoh. The Torah always mentioned Pharaoh. All the historians of the time mentioned Pharaoh. So why is there such a difference? A minute difference.
Because the Syrian conquered Egypt. That's what they called their king for Malik.
That's fine. But how do we know at that time? That knowledge wasn't there. The language of the Egyptians, the hieroglyphs at that time was a dead language. The hieroglyphs was arrived in the 19th century, if not the beginning of the 20th century. Think about this. Think about this. And we know for it to be true, because Fir'aun was started to mention in 14th century BC, in the New Kingdom. The old Middle Kingdom, at the time of Yusuf alayhi salam, they called him king, Malik. But no one knew that at that time. We know it to be correct today, because about 1300 years after, we learned to translate the hieroglyphs, the Egyptian language. But they never knew that at that time. So what's the best possible explanation? You can't claim now the Prophet ﷺ copied the Bible, because that means he knew what was right, left what was wrong, and took what was correct.